I think we're going to launch straight into the text today. Thank you for all your contributions for Rachel and Leah. I haven't been able to get them up onto the screen yet, so that we'll have a double dose of that next time. But I hope did you all get the texts? Yeah, great. So we're going to start with this 18th century women's prayer at one of the Techinas, which are, were, if you look at the old Jewish encyclopedia, which was sort of published, which actually in many ways is far superior to the Encyclopedia Judaica, but it was published at the sort of, early 1900s. If you look up Techinas in there, they will say these are prayers for women that were written by men for them to use. And it was only really probably about 20 years ago, someone said, hang on, why are men writing prayers about childbirth? Couldn't the women have written their own? And clearly, I mean, if you look at them and you examine them, it's very clear that many of them are. I mean, some of them may have come from men, but most of them were written by women. But this one is actually based on Zohar. So I have a feeling that this may not be actually written by a woman, but it's a rather interesting prayer. So I'm going to read it to you just as an introduction to our topic today, who is this rather obscure person, Serach bat Asher. So it says, Lord of the world, I pray to you, God, as Queen Esther prayed. Lord of the whole world, with your right hand and your left hand, you've created the whole world with both your hands. May you spread our mercies over me. That should be your mercies over me. There are also there in paradise 6 chambers in which there are several thousand righteous women who have never suffered the pains of hell. Bitya, the queen, daughter of Pharaoh, is there. There is a place in paradise where a curtain is prepared to be spread, which allows to see the image of Moses, our teacher. Then she bows and says, how worthy is my strength and how knowing is my power. I drew such a light out of the water. I brought up this dear light. This happens 3 times a day. In the next chamber, there are also thousands upon thousands of women, and Serach, the daughter of Asher, is a queen. And every day it is announced 3 times, here comes the image of Joseph the righteous. Then she bows to him and says, praise is my strength, and how worthy is my power, that I was privileged to tell my lord Jacob that my uncle was alive. And in the upper chamber, he studies Torah. And in the other chamber, they sing hymns and praises and study Torah. In the 3rd chamber is our mother Jochebed, the mother of Moses, our teacher, with many women, and they praise God, blessed be he, 3 times every day, and say the song of the sea with great joy. And Miriam, the prophet, the sister of Aaron, with the timbrel in her hand, is there, and says this verse by herself, and many holy angels are with her, and praise God's name. In the 4th chamber sits Deborah, the prophet, with many thousand women, and they praise God's blessed name, and they sing the song. And the chambers of the matriarchs cannot be described. No one can come into their chambers. Now, dear women, when the souls are together in paradise, how much joy there is. Therefore, I pray you, praise God with great devotion, and to say your prayers that you may be worthy with our mothers. So that is very much, a prayer enjoining women to be, pay attention to their prayers. It's very significant that all these people are praying 3 times a day. That's Shacharit, Mincha, Ma'ariv. There is a rabbinic tradition that women do not have to pray 3 times a day. There's quite a debate over it. And in fact, the conclusion is that women need only pray once a day. But clearly within the community that produced this prayer, there was a sort of a sense or a feeling that women were not sufficiently devoted to their prayers. And so they're enjoining that they should pray 3 times, like all these thousands of women, thousands and thousands and thousands of women in heaven who are gathered around these significant figures. But then you look at the significant figures and you see, obviously, the matriarchs, but there's very little said about them because they have their own special place and nobody with them. And so nobody knows what it's like. Jochebed is the mother of Moses, I suppose is significant. Miriam certainly is. Deborah certainly is. But these first two, Bitya bat Pharaoh and Serach bat Asher, I mean, even Bitya bat Pharaoh has a significant role in the Bible because she saves Moses. But Serach bat Asher, all we have in Torah is the name. That's all. So if you turn to the next text, Genesis 46:7, this is part of a long genealogy, which begins actually at verse 6. It begins, thus Jacob and all his offspring with him came to Egypt. He brought with him to Egypt his sons and grandsons, his daughters and granddaughters, all of his offspring. So it doesn't mention the daughters, though, except for, I don't think even Dinah is mentioned at this point, and doesn't mention the granddaughters, except for this one, which you have here. The sons of Asher, according to their families, from Jimnah, the family of the Jimnites, Genesis 46, the sons of Asher were Jimnah and Ishva and Isui and Beriah, and Serach their sister, and the sons of Beriah, Heber and Malchiel. So these are the ones who joined Jacob in going down to Egypt after Joseph, had declared himself to his brothers, and they went back and they brought the family back. What is unusual is that Serach is mentioned, because women aren't usually mentioned unless they have a role. But she doesn't have a role. She's just mentioned. Okay? And then you look at the next one, Numbers 26. And here, what you've got here is the census that was taken in the desert after the rebellion of Korach. There was not rebellion of Korach, Pinchas, the time of Pinchas, who, if you remember, managed to murder a man and his Midianite concubine consorting. He put a spear through them. There clearly had been too much intermarriage for his liking, or indeed for God's, because that was followed by a plague, and thousands died. After which God asked Moses to take a census of the survivors. And the list of the survivors is here. From the sons of Asher, according to their families, from Jimnah, the family of Jimnites, from Ishvi, the family of Ishvites, from Beriah, the family of Berahites, from the sons of Beriah, from Heber, the family of Heberites, from Amalchiel, the family of Amalchites, and the name of the daughter of Asher was Serach. Now, I don't know what you make of that. Any thoughts, any comments? It seems very weird. It doesn't even fit in with the, from this person, you've got all their descendants, from this, person, you've got all their descendants, and so on. It doesn't even say, her descendants. Maybe she didn't have any descendants, or they're not relevant because she's not a man. We know that it's her husband's family that are mentioned. But why add her? Well, why is she there?
She sounds to be very charismatic to start with.
Well, I mean, yes. I mean, I'd be intrigued. I would love to know what she was really like. Clearly, yeah. She had, you could have a very prosaic answer. You could say that basically whoever wrote this was just basically copying from other texts, and and had sort of kind of picked up on the Genesis text or whatever, and sort of kind of just continued to copy. not realizing that actually mentioning her here was irrelevant because her descendants are not sort of listed, so it could just be a mistake, or it could be that she was significant in some way. Elizabeth.
I don't think mentioning women is ever just something that people do accidentally. I think that there's something that was extraordinary about her in some way. I don't think in general society women are ever, or it's a lot of trouble for women just to be themselves. The ones that are mentioned are always the exception.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark.
When women's names are found in lists made by men, it's usually because they're expected to be there, that somehow Serach's name was expected to be there. And that in itself, I think, is significant, that people would expect to see her name in whatever context and for whatever reason. She isn't there by chance, following on what Elizabeth said. Yeah,
we've got Christina and Francis. So Christina, if you want to.
I'm not sure where I read it. I'd never heard of her. I'd never remarked on her. I'm very sorry to say, but I was trying to figure out who she was in preparation. And one of the things I read basically said she must have been well known at the time for her name to keep cropping up. And, if men in yeshivot, for thousands of years can say that everything in the Torah is there for a reason, every letter, every word, then I think we as women can say that if her name keeps cropping up, it crops up for a reason. And, we can dig into all of this midrash.
Exactly. Right. Francis.
I think it's interesting the way.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you very well. Right, let's see what you say. I think the way she is mentioned is curious in Genesis, not as a daughter of Asher, but as a sister to his sons. Yes, that's I'm glad you picked that up, because that is an anomaly that the rabbis pick up on. Certainly, she's a sister to his sons, but not necessarily the daughter of Asher. But you can add to that anomaly the way in Numbers it's mentioned. The name of the daughter Asher was Serach, which is also, we'll see later how the rabbis interpret that. There's just one other place in the Bible where she's mentioned, which is in Chronicles. The book of Chronicles begins with a family tree that goes back to Adam, and kind of goes then through certainly to David and Solomon, and then on through the history of the kings. It's one of the later books of the Bible, but many people think that a lot of what you find in Chronicles is actually from an older text than Samuel and Kings. Although they have a gloss on David, they very much do a sort of kind of a sort of a PR job on David, to make him suitable to be the ancestor of the Messiah. But what they say, I mean, it's just basically, it's commenting, it's really the same as the Genesis. The sons of Asher were Jimna and Ishva and Ishvi and Beriah and Serach, their sister. That's all. Okay? So very clearly, the Bible and, Torah and Tanakh, neither of them actually tell us why she was significant. But as you've all pointed out, she must have been significant. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been mentioned. So what did she do? This is where we have to go to Midrash. And the first one to look at is Genesis 46. Okay, all the souls who came with Jacob to Egypt, who came from his loins besides Jacob's sons, wives, all the souls were 66. And the sons of Joseph who were born in Egypt were 2 souls. All the souls of the house of Jacob who came to Egypt were 70. What's the problem?
It becomes 69 with Joseph and his 2 sons, not
Yeah.
70.
Yeah. Okay. So what's the obvious answer?
Unless they count Joseph's wife, because all the other wives are not counted, right?
All the other wives are not counted. Okay.
The wives of the sons.
Yes. There are two potential candidates. One is Jochebed, the mother of Moses, who would have at this point been, basically she couldn't have been born yet, because it's 200 years between the sort of that going, but she's mentioned in Midrash. I mean, they're not very good on history. But the other obvious person is to count Serach, since she's the only woman in all these lists. So that's what happens in Bereshit Rabbah, the next one we're looking at. Okay. Bereshit Rabbah 94:9. All the souls belonging to Jacob were 66. And the sons of Joseph were 2 souls. All the souls of the house of Jacob who came into Egypt were 70. Okay, so that's our text. Rabbi Levi said in the name of Rabbi Samuel ben Nachman, have you ever seen a man give his neighbor 66 glasses, then give him another 3 and count them 70? My answer to that is yes. Certainly, glasses borrowed for a party from a, wine merchant and broken on the thing, but that's not his point. The point is there's something's going on here. So some say that Serach, the daughter of Asher, made up the number to 70. Thus it is written. Okay, hang on, before we just move on a minute, it's just
But
yeah,
in the
actually,
verse itself,
sorry.
it doesn't mention that they didn't count the daughters, right? Just
No.
they didn't count the wives of the sons of Jacob. So
That's also true. I mean, they could have counted Dinah, but Dinah is not counted here. Dinah doesn't seem to sort of work in these lists. It's again, as I say, Jochebed is mentioned as an option, but Dinah is never mentioned as an option. So Serach as a daughter of one of the tribes could be, but so could Dinah, but Dinah isn't and Serach is. Anyway, it seems to be that they think it's Serach. But now let's look at this proof text. Okay. Some say that Serach, the daughter of Asher, made up the number of 70. Thus it is written. Then cried a wise woman out of the city, hear, hear, I say, I pray to you, I pray you to Joab. I'm sorry about this really old-fashioned text I've got here. I pray unto Joab, come here hither, that I may speak with thee. And he came near unto her, and the woman said, art thou Joab? Now, before I carry on, you must think, what on earth is this all about? So let me give you a bit of background. Does anyone know the background to this story? This is the story of the wise woman of Arvel, which was what I was going to talk about this week, and so I am talking about this week. Essentially, there was this man called Sheba ben Bichri, who rebelled against King David. He got many of the tribes. He was, I think, from the tribe of Benjamin, and therefore, and a descendant of, or a relative of King Saul. So he saw David as an upstart and a usurper, and he instigated a rebellion against him. in order to overthrow David and reestablish the Saul dynasty on the throne. And he fetched up he was defeated in a battle. First he had great success, and then he was defeated by David's troops, under whose general was Joab, or Joab, if you're using the English, Joab. And he fled to this city called Avel. It was a walled city, and he fled inside it. And the people of Avel, who supported him, protected him. So Joab comes, wants them to give up Sheva ben Bichri. That's the background to the story, okay? So there's a wise woman in the city, okay? And she stands up and says, let me talk to Joab. Let me talk to him. And so the italics is the quotation from Samuel. What is in sort of square print is the midrash. Okay, your name is Joab, she said to him, meaning you are a father to Israel. Yoav, Av meaning father. Okay, but instead, or rather, whereas in fact you are but a destroyer, and do not fit your name. You're a destroyer because you are set to destroy this city. Okay. Okay. Don't you and David possess learning yet? And then the quote is, and so they ended, by which he meant, have the words of Torah ended by now? In other words, she's saying to him, I thought you were men of learning. You know nothing of Torah, because is it not written, when you draw nigh to a city to fight against it, then proclaim peace to it, which is one of the quotations from Deuteronomy. So when you're going to fight, you don't simply lay siege, you negotiate terms, which Joab wasn't doing. He was going to destroy Avel because it was holding on to or protecting Sheva ben Bichri. Okay, so this wise woman is arguing Torah, and arguing Torah with a general, which is a pretty brave thing to do, an enemy general, and telling him off, and also telling David off, telling the king off for not observing halakha. Okay, who are you then? He asked her. She said, I am of them that are peaceable and faithful, shalomeh and emuneh in Israel. Okay? It is I who made up, hoshlamti, the numbers, the minyan of Israel in Egypt. It is I who delivered, which is hoshlamti, the faithful, ne'eman, to the faithful. Okay? This needs, firstly, before we carry on, yes, okay. Firstly, we look at these puns. She says that she is Shlomeh and Emuneh, and so the idea of the pun of Hoshlamti, which is that made up, completed, because Shalom can mean completion, and numbers of the minyan comes from emuna. It doesn't, but it's a sort of kind of emuna and minyan are sort of kind of similar in sound. The next one is much more of a pun. Hoshlamti again. This is to deliver is another hashlim it's another sort of form of the word, and ne'eman are the faithful. So so I delivered the faithful to the faithful. All right, and then that's explained as being delivered Joseph to Moses. Okay, now what does this mean, delivers the faithful Joseph to Moses? These are the midrashim that we're going to explore today. I don't know if you have any thoughts or comments so far. You understand what's going on. It's a little bit complicated. Okay.
Yeah, I'm just not sure about this wise woman who she is.
Well, that's the point. Okay.
Yeah.
All we know is that she's a wise woman and she lives in Arville.
But I mean, to speak up like that, that's quite a brave thing to do, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes. Emma, you want to say something?
I don't know. She seems to be like positioning herself as a kind of midwife. Like this, the word deliver made me think of that, but kind of just making up the minyan doesn't necessarily mean that she was the minyan, as in she delivered Israelite babies to join the minyan and from Joseph to Moses. So like in every generation.
That is, yes. I mean, that's a really interesting, an interesting idea. I'd never thought about it that way.
A wise woman is a midwife as well. Like that's.
Yes. There is, I mean, there is a tradition of wise women. There are several wise women that crop up in Tanakh, particularly around the stories of David. Abigail is one. But they seem to have a position and a position of authority within the community, because they seem to act as spokespeople. There is a sort of fair bit of speculation to suggest that this was probably actually a particular role, that when it comes to negotiations, that they hit on the idea that maybe women are better at it. Because they're very often used. I mean, there are two cases where women are used to negotiate peaceful terms between two warring factions when David is fighting people. So they're sort of kind of acting a role of diplomacy. Very skilled in language, use language well. They really are very interesting. And, you know, this is what I would have done if I hadn't been doing Shlomit Dibri, but another time, maybe we can look at that. But yes, I had never thought about this idea of her being, you know, delivering as a midwife. But what she certainly is doing is delivering peace, you know, ending conflicts, negotiating settlements. That seems to be the role of these wise women. But the interesting thing is that, you know, she delivered the faithful to the faithful, Joseph to Moses. How many generations are we talking about? Well, it's again, it's 200 plus years. Christina, you want to say something?
Well, what Emma said was so much more sophisticated that now I just want to listen to you talk about that. I mean, then is this an act of like matricide to destroy the city? I was just going to say, does that mean that she is saying she's the one who showed Moses where Joseph's grave was?
Well, this is where we're getting to. Yes, this is where we're getting to. Yeah. So, you know, she says, you know, seek you to destroy a city, and I myself, who am a mother in Israel. Okay, this is all part of what, you know, what she's saying here, you know, this is part of the words that she says to Yoav, with the rabbinic commentary on it. The rabbinic commentary already identified this wise woman as Serach. You know, some say that Serach was the daughter of Asher, made up the number of 70. This is how this midrash begins. Thus it is written. And then the proof text that Serach made up the number of 70 is a proof text that takes place in the time of David. So how can this prove that that was Serach? But, you know, we've already, you know, we're trying to get our heads around the fact that she was around in Joseph's time and she was around in Moses's time. Now they're suggesting she was around in the time of David. You're looking puzzled, Christina. I mean,
I'm just trying to do the math, but either example we've seen, they would both have had to have lived for over 2 centuries, 3.
Yes,
I'm trying to do the math, which is why you see smoke.
Yeah, well, I mean, yes, well, I mean, yeah, it is sort of slightly, it is a bit like that. I mean, yes, you know, 200 years is a conservative guess. If we're going into the time of David, I mean, that's, is it 400 years? 500 years?
I mean, how long did Abraham live? how long did Noah live? Why not?
Yeah, except after the flood, Moses lived 120. That's kind of meant to be the limits these days. But anyway, yeah. Okay, yes.
Can I bring up the fact that she was counted in the minyan? Because
Yes.
even today, the wisest woman would not be counted in some people's minyan.
Yes.
And does it imply that it's not her wisdom that counted her in there? Is there an element of, am I trying to read something into it? That maybe she wasn't always a woman? Maybe.
Wow, that's Richard. Now, one of the things that you have to be aware of is when we think about a minyan, we always think about a minyan as of 10, but there are other minyanim that we used. The mezuman, for example, the 3 required to say certain lines of Birkat Hamazon, of the grace after meals, which requires 3 people. If you're going to say the Ravotaina Barech, Hishem Adonai Mevarach B'Natavi Adolam, that bit of it, you don't say if there are less than 3 people blessing after having eaten together. Now, a woman can be part of that minyan. So, we have, because nowadays we talk about that as a mezuman. There's also a minyan of 7 that is required for certain things. There are different minyanim, and it's possible that in this midrash, when you're talking about minyan, they're not talking about the minyan of 10 for prayer, which would be men. So it's difficult. It's difficult to sort of, really to know entirely. Christina.
I'm really sorry. I'm trying to find the proof text in 2 Samuel, and I can't find the line about the minyan of Israel in Egypt.
You can't, because that's a midrash. That's midrash.
Okay, thanks. The italics versus block text got a little bit confusing.
Yes, maybe I need to rewrite this. I mean, this is from the Sonsino, which I have to say I prefer to Sepharia. And these are texts I gathered a long time ago, but it does need, the language needs updating, and there must be I need to reformat it to make it easier to see what is the actual text.
Maybe you just need to publish a women's midrash then.
Well, we'll see. Okay. So anyway,
yeah, this is exactly my question. When you mentioned the difference between the italics and the square, I didn't quite understand the difference.
Yes, the italics is the quotation from Samuel.
Okay.
And also there's a quotation from Deuteronomy, which she brings in the midrash. Okay, that when you come to a city, you must seek peace before you fight. That's Deuteronomy. So anything in italics is quoted from the Bible. And the regular text is the midrash. Okay, so the midrash begins by saying Serach made up the 70 who left Egypt, left for Egypt. And then as a proof text that she was the one who did this, they quote this story of a wise woman of Avel, which has nothing to do with the Serach story, if you look at the Bible, nothing at all. But what they're doing here is putting flesh on the bones of the story of the woman of Avel by explaining what she says to Yoav in much more detail than you're told. I mean, you have quite a lot anyway there, but here they're explaining that she's accusing him and David of not knowing Torah and not following Torah. And when he asks who she is, she doesn't say, her name. We don't know what her name is. She's just known as the wise woman of Avel. But she says, I am one of those that is peaceful and faithful, which again is the quotation from this thing when Yoav asks her, but the Midrash then interprets that I am one that is peaceful and faithful to be from Shalom, Hoshlamti, I made up the minyan of Israel in Egypt, which is the proof that she was a 70. I am the one who made up the numbers, essentially minyan here, is I made up the 70 of Israel in Egypt. So that's your proof text, that Serach was the, that Serach was the 70th person who went down to Egypt. And then it goes on, it is I who delivered the faithful to the faithful, that is Joseph to Moses, which refers to something that we will look at later, which is one of the most famous stories about Serach bat Asher, is that she is the one who found Joseph's bones for Moses to take back to the promised land to be buried there. Because of course he died and was buried in Egypt. So that is the, the Midrash is using this text, which has nothing to do with Serach bat Asher, or anything to do with going down to Egypt or coming back up to Egypt with Joseph, Joseph's bones, but putting onto it Serach bat Asher. So they're identifying, right, Mark.
Rashi says that there is a tradition that the wise woman of Abel was Serach.
Yes.
Where does that come from?
This Midrash.
It's a Midrash.
It's this particular Midrash.
Yeah.
From Bereshit Rabbah.
Right.
So, yeah, that's where, yes. I mean, Bereshit Rabbah is one of the earliest of sort of Midrash Agadah. So, there are many Midrashim that then quote this.
Mm.
So by the time Rashi comes along, Serach bat Asher is associated.
Is the wise woman of
Is
Abel.
the wise woman of Abel. So
Right.
yes, so you have to get your head around, Christine, the fact that she must have lived for about 600 years. Okay. I mean, history, the rabbis were not great on history. So for a historian, that must be very frustrating at times. But, there is a saying, a very famous rabbinic saying, which is there's no before or after in Torah. Things don't happen chronologically. They can happen.
Well, there's no before or after in the
anytime.
Talmud either, is there?
Well, no.
You've got
That's
rabbis
true.
from centuries apart arguing.
Absolutely. That's also true. Yes.
It's almost as if, all of Israel and its history is in one place at any one time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I may have struggled to figure out where they were getting minyan from, but I followed the math in the end, and I think it's very clever.
Right.
At least that she's the 70th person.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Good. Right. So if we carry on, this is a long midrash, and needs a lot of unpacking, but it's really, I think it's wonderful. So the woman said to Yoav, "Behold, his head shall be thrown down to you." Okay. Basically, at the end of this story, the end of this discussion with Yoav, she persuades Yoav not to besiege and destroy the city, and she will deliver Yoav Sheva Bishri to him. So what she then has to do is to go to the council of elders in Avel and persuade them that if they want to save their own lives, they're going to have to stop protecting this guy. And she persuades them not only to do that, but basically to behead him, throw his head over the walls so that Yoav knows in truth that they've killed him. So that what happens, okay? What the Midrash does, and I missed out the middle bit where all this happens because it gets so complicated, although we, have a couple of hours just on this one Midrash. This is how the Midrash continues. The woman said to Yoav, "Behold, his head shall be thrown to you." How did she know this? Is she a prophet? Okay, she spoke thus: "He who is insolent towards the royal house of David will be decapitated by divine decree." straightway, then the woman went to all the people in her wisdom. That's the quote. This is what the Midrash does with it. Do you not know David's record? She urged them. Which people has successfully resisted him? Which kingdom has resisted him? In other words, you don't stand a chance. Listen, guys, is it worth it? Is it worth harboring this rebel? You're not going to win. He's not going to win. Just think of how, what to do. Okay. So they responded by saying, what does he demand? In other words, what does Yoav want? Okay. What Yoav wants is Sheva ben Bichri, but she doesn't say that. What she says is 1,000 men. She replied, is it not better to sacrifice 1,000 men than that your city be destroyed? Let everyone give according to his means, they proposed. What does that mean? Anyone want to hazard a guess of what that means?
Give people to be sacrificed?
Let every guy go home and pick out, which of his sons, which of his servants to make up those 1,000 men. Okay. So she says, perhaps he can be forgiven to forgo a little. All right. And then she, and so she pretended to go and appease him. She didn't actually go, but she pretended. Then she came back and returned with a number reduced then from 1,000 to 500, and then to 100, and then to 10, and finally to 1. Okay, and the one he wants is a lodger here. Who was he? Sheva, the son of Bichri. Forthwith, they cut off his head. Okay, they cut off the head of Sheva ben Bichri. So in other words, this whole discussion that she has with Yoav is a pure invention. She's playing the elders, having said to them, 1,000 men. She's a bit horrified when they actually offer 1,000 men. So she says, wait a minute, I'll just go and see if it's a bit less. But the negotiation is designed to ensure that they are willing to give him up. If right at the beginning she said to them, give up Sheva ben Bichri, they would have put all sorts of arguments as to why they couldn't. Comments, thoughts, please. Mark.
It's a bit like a government that says, right, we're going to double your taxes, and everybody sort of shrieks in alarm. And they say, well, maybe we'll only sort of make 20% extra tax, and then everyone heaves a sigh of relief. So you go in advance of what you actually want. And she was wise because she beat them down, as it were, to just that one person.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments?
She two from me. One is that she mentions that he is a lodger, is not one of us.
Yes.
And the second one, that it reminds me of, I think it's a Midrash, it's not in the Bible, perhaps it's in the Bible, Lot.
Abraham, it is in the Bible.
Yes,
it is in the Bible.
Yeah.
Yes, Abraham arguing with God.
Yeah.
If there are 100 righteous men. Exactly.
But also, yes, I didn't mean the negotiation between Abraham and God, but the fact that Lot had to give. So there were the angels that were visiting him.
Yes. Right. Yes.
And he had to give them.
Right. Yes.
In Sodom. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yes. No, this does remind me very much of Abraham arguing with God, and I think. I don't know whether there's a deliberate sort of play there. Christina?
I mean, I think that's such a brilliant statement. And now it makes me wonder, there's the Midrash that the outcry of Sodom is a woman. I think she's Potiphar, I think her name is, and she is helping this man, and they get so enraged, and she gets hurt, and it's her cry to God, because even though the feminine in Hebrew is probably, anyways, but there's this outcry, and she's using this halacha for Deuteronomy to sort of indict him, to get him to listen to her. And then she comes up with this very clever plan that does sound like Abraham. I don't know if there's like, there's an echo of that in Judges as well.
It's a midrash I'm not familiar with. When you're...
Oh, it's in the book you told me to buy, the studies in Bereshit. Yeah, it's this amazing midrash because it's the feminine, you know, this outcry, which is also in like Ezekiel, and she's mentioned in Ezekiel as well, which I think I read Light Chronicles seems to have other versions of stories. There's another version of Eden. And so then, of course, because nothing's there by accident, the feminine could be referring to the city, but that's no fun. So what are the rabbis they're going to do? They're going to say, whose outcry is it? Whose outcry does come here? Well, it's a woman. What's this woman doing? She's helping the stranger. She's helping the poor. And they attack her for that. It's Lot's either daughter or granddaughter. And it's her, and they tear her apart. And it's her cry to God that makes God say, I'm going to go see if this is true.
That's interesting.
And then that's why in Judges 19, when we have this horrible, you know,
story of
HBO like Game of Thrones has nothing on Judges, that her dismemberment is playing on this midrash of Sodom story. And
well, it's the midrash is playing on the dismemberment in the Torah. It's the other way around. But no, I don't know that. I must look that one up. So yeah.
Well, you must have just forgotten it because you did recommend it to me, which is how I know it.
Yes. But it is. It must be one that but it's somehow passed me by. Put it that way. So thank you about that. Okay. So we still have this problem. Essentially, if this is Sheva ben Bichri, she seems to be pretty old, having been mentioned in Genesis and is now sort of kind of mentioned in Kings. The next text is actually the original text of the about the wise woman of Avel. So you can read that on its own. And then the Kohelet Rabbah, which comes next, is the same version, and it's probably a little bit easier than the other one. So we'll just read through it very quickly. It's the same story, but Kohelet Rabbah is a slightly later midrash, obviously on the book of Kohelet Ecclesiastes, and it's basically a comment on wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroys much good. Okay. Another interpretation of wisdom is better refers to the wisdom of Serach, the daughter of Asher. Than weapons of war, that is, than the weapons of Yoav, as it is said, then cried a wise woman of the city, which indicates that he was some distance away. And he came near to her, and the woman said, Art thou Yoav? She meant, you are a destroyer, and you do not act up on your name. You are not a son of Torah, nor is David. For is it not written in the Torah, when you draw nigh to a city to fight against it, then pay peace to it? They asked her, what does he want? What does he want? And she replied, 1,000 men. They said to her, let every man give according to his means. She then said to them, I will go and try to persuade him to take less. She pretended to go to interview Yoav and return, and she told them he wants 500. They replied, let every man give according to his means. She said to them, I will go and appeal to him. Perhaps he will reduce the number. And she pretended to go and return and told them, he only wants one man. He is a stranger in our midst. And they replied, even if he were the best man in the city, we would surrender him. She said to them, his name is Sheva, the son of Bichri. Forthwith, they took the head of Sheva, the son of Bichri, and threw it over the wall. But one sinner destroys much good. That is Sheva, the son of Bichri. Now, what the ending of that, I always think is slightly sort of equivocal, because is the sinner who destroys much good Sheva son of Bichri, in that he has persuaded or forced these otherwise good citizens into murder, or is it that he himself is the one who's been, destroy much good? Is it he himself rather than what he does to the people? So let's go back. We are now going to go back to look at this story of Serach.
Can I ask
yes.
something?
Yes, please do.
This whole story, like,
oh dear, has Deborah, have we lost her?
Yeah, I mean, that wasn't me.
Well, listen, I can't necessarily see everyone, so Emma, when she sort of jumps on again, interrupt me.
Yeah.
So okay. Oh, that's so frustrating. It must be so frustrating for her.
I don't know if you've said it already, but I'm just confused by her quick turnaround from when you come close to a city, shouldn't you proclaim peace before making war? And then suddenly, oh, actually, I'll give you whatever you want. Like, have him, you can have his head.
Well, she is negotiating terms for peace, actually.
Right, and her terms is he has to get
there has to be, yes, I mean, you have to, there has to be a negotiation,
Deborah is back, by the way.
Oh, right, Deborah. You're muted. Can you unmute?
When she starts this negotiation, it just seems like she's trying to grab more power by starting so high and then going down. Why didn't she just say they want a head of a man?
Because I think, because I think the reason is that, they knew, they took him into the city. David's armies camped around. They know that the reason David's army is attacking the city is because of this one man. If she said to them simply, look, just give him up and we'll be okay, they would say no, because they knew, that's why they took him. They promised to protect him. Why would they, having promised to protect him? She had to sort of, as it were, get them into a position where they felt that it was okay to give him up.
Okay.
And if they are prepared to sacrifice 1,000 of their citizens for them, then he says, well, actually, you don't have to sacrifice quite so many. Actually, you don't have to sacrifice any of your citizens. There's just this one man who isn't one of ours anyway. Then they're quite happy to do it. But if she'd simply gone to them and said, give him up, the chances are they would have said no. That's why we're,
All right.
What about the halakha of isn't it true that you can't sacrifice an innocent person to save another life?
Yeah, that's Talmudic. That's Talmud.
Okay. Well, I guess I was thinking, but if he was going to be one of the 1,000 that died anyway, then you're not sacrificing him. He was already going to die.
Yeah. Yes.
Then you just get to save 999 others.
Exactly. Yes.
It's like one of those moral dilemmas in philosophy, right?
Yes.
but I would, you mentioned that the people of the city knew that he is after Sheva ben Bichri, but yes. I'm not sure according to the text. So I am sure that she is a very wise woman, because she managed to at least she managed to point to the moral side of things when she started the conversation. But at least in the conversation, he makes it clear that it is Sheva Ben Pirkei, who is after.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, that's true. Yes, because that's his reason for attacking the city, is because they're harboring him. So, you know, if they give him up, then there's no need for him to attack the city. But, you know, the fact is they took him inside knowing that this was likely to happen. So, you know, clearly the mood or the intention of the men of the city is, we will fight to defend this man. You know, we will. And, you know, they may even have had a point that actually he probably had a more rightful claim to the throne than David. You know, as part of the sort of Saul dynasty. So there's all, you know, it's all politics, I think, in the end. It's really. So anyway, let's go back to Exodus chapter 13, verse 19. Okay. Which is, Moses took the bones of Joseph with him. This is when Moses was leaving Egypt, okay? For he had solemnly sworn the people of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here with you, okay? Shemot Rabbah, the earliest midrash on Exodus, the earliest Aggadic midrash on Exodus says, how did Moses know where Joseph was buried? Okay, now, everybody would have known where the bones of Joseph was buried. He was a major figure. He was mummified. He would have had his tomb like all the sort of kind of potentates. The Israelites would not have forgotten where he was buried, but by the time of the Midrash, they will have forgotten the way Egyptians would have buried people like Joseph. And so from their point of view, the question was, yeah, how did Moses? Also, it fits neatly with the story. So how is it that Moses knew where Joseph was buried? Some opine that Serach, the daughter of Asher, showed him the place in the Nile where he was buried. So if Serach came down from Egypt, and she was still around 200 years later when they left Egypt, then she probably, you know, she'd be the one person who remembered where his bones were buried. Okay. So Deuteronomy Rabbah says, expands on this. Okay, it's later. Why did Moses merit that God should busy himself with his burial? This is actually on the death of Moses. Okay, why was it? Moses, of course, died with God. Nobody knows his burial place, and so the tradition is that God's self buried Moses. Okay. Why did he busy himself with his burial? Because when God went down to Egypt and the time of redemption of Israel had come, all Israel were occupied with gathering silver and gold, but Moses was going around the city and for 3 days and 3 nights was laboring to find Joseph's coffin, for the Israelites could not leave Egypt without Joseph. Why? Because he so bound them by an oath before his death, as it is said in respect to Genesis. And Joseph took an oath of the children of Israel, basically saying, when you return, do not leave my bones in Egypt, take me up back to Canaan, to the promised land. Now, after Moses had tired himself out, a certain Segula met him, observing that he was weary from his efforts. Okay, so this is not Serach but Asher, this is Segula. She said to him, my Lord Moses, why are you tired? And he replied, for 3 days and 3 nights I've been going round the city to find Joseph's coffin, and I cannot find it. Said she to him, come with me, and I will show you where it is. And she took him to the river and said to him, in this place have the magicians and astrologers made for him a coffin of 500 talents in weight and cast it into the river. And thus they spoke to Pharaoh, if it is your wish that the people should never leave this place, then as long as they will not find the bones of Joseph, that long they will be unable to leave. I love the way these sort of kind of legends get sort of mixed up in the story. Okay, so they buried, so, you know, according to this, Joseph didn't have a sort of traditional Egyptian burial. They submerged his coffin in, you know, heavy weights so that nobody would find them. But immediately Moses placed himself by the bank of the river and called out, Joseph, Joseph, you know how you have adjured Israel with the words, God will surely remember you. Pakod pakadati. Remember those words. We're going to come across them several times. Give honor to the God of Israel and do not hold up the redemption of Israel. You have good deeds to your credit. Intercede then with your creator and come up from the depths. Whereupon immediately Joseph's coffin began to break through the waters and rise from the depths like a stick. And Moses took it and placed it upon his shoulder and carried it, and all Israel followed him. And while Israel carried the silver and gold which they'd taken away from Egypt, Moses was carrying Joseph's coffin. And God said to Moses, Moses, you say that you have done a small thing. By your life, this act of kindness is a great thing. Since you ignored silver and gold, I too will do to you this kindness, in that I will busy myself with your burial. So because Moses was responsible for finding, you know, bones of Joseph and taking them for proper burial in Israel, so God buried Moses. But in the meantime, we have this Segula, okay? Who is Segula? I think you can guess now from, you know, where we're going with this. Who is Segula? Anyone?
It actually doesn't say.
It doesn't say.
It doesn't say. I mean,
it doesn't say. Okay, but this is Midrash, and Midrash likes to tie up ends one way or another. And Segula, the word in Hebrew, means hidden, a hidden treasure. Okay, so there is a hint in the word that Segula is not this person's real name. Their real name is, you know, sort of either nod, nod, wink, wink, you know who, or she's somebody in disguise. Okay. It's okay. So her words, though, these words, God will surely remember you, are significant in the next one. Okay, this is complicated. I'm sorry, this is very complicated, but I'd like to bring it because it sort of kind of brings the whole story to a sort of slight another level in a way. This is Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, which is a much later midrash. And Rabbi Eliezer said, the 5 letters of Torah, which alone of all the letters in the Torah are of double shape, all appertain to the mystery of redemption. So with chaf chaf, and I put the chaf in the Hebrew there, our father Abraham was redeemed from Ur of the Chaldees, as it is says, lech lecha. You've got the 2 chafs at the end of the word lech lecha, which is get you out of your country and from your people to the land which I will show you, which starts Abraham's journey. Okay, so that's the first redemption that comes from 2 letters. Okay, then with mem, okay, our father Isaac was redeemed from the land of the Philistines, as it says, go from us, for you are much mightier. The word being mimenu ma'od. In fact, there are 3 mems, mimenu and ma'od. You've got your mems there because you're much mightier than we are. So this was the story of Isaac passing off Rebecca as his sister, and being, you know, and the king, fancying her and then discovering that it was his wife and not his sister. And he basically throws Isaac out, but could equally well have killed him. So he was delivered because of two men's. Then you have Nun. Our father Jacob was redeemed from the hand of Esau. As it is said, deliver me, I pray you, Hatzileni na. Okay, and you've got the ni and the na. It's getting a bit sort of, Lech Lecha is quite nice. Hatzileni na. They're pushing it a bit, but the idea again is that these two letters are significant, and basically Jacob was saved. He was not murdered by Esau. And now we've got to the one that is significant for us, is with pay. Israel was redeemed from Egypt, as it is said, I have surely visited you, pakod pakadati, okay, and seen that which is done to you in Egypt. And I have said, I will bring you up out of the affliction of Egypt. This is where it is God who, after the trials of slavery, the people cry to, God hears their voice, and he says to Moses, basically, pakod pakadati, this is what I've seen that which is done to you in Egypt. Okay, we'll forget the tzadi. And we'll go back to these letters, if you can find that where we start. Okay, these special letters, including the tzadi, were delivered only to our father Abraham. Our father Abraham delivered them to Isaac. Isaac delivered them to Jacob. Jacob delivered the mystery of the redemption to Joseph. As is said, but God will surely visit, pakod yifkod, you. Okay, so Joseph is received, has this in Genesis, I think it's 50. I think that's, I don't know, that reference is wrong. So I don't know which verse, I missed out a digit there. Okay, so Joseph, his son, that is Jacob's son, delivered the secret of the redemption to his brethren, to the other 11 tribes. And Asher, the son of Jacob, then gave the mystery of the redemption to Serach, his daughter. So when Moses and Aaron came to the elders of Israel and performed the signs in their sight, the elders of Israel went to Serach, the daughter of Asher, and said to her, a certain man has come, and he has performed signs in our sight, thus and thus. And she said to them, there is no reality in signs. We'll just pause there a minute, okay? Essentially, you know the story at the burning bush, when God promised Moses he should go, or told Moses he should go and deliver the people, and basically he should go to Pharaoh. Moses says, but he won't believe me. And so God gives him the signs, putting his hand into a thing and coming out leprous and throwing his staff on the floor and it becoming a snake. These are the signs to convince Pharaoh. But then he also has to convince the people, after, years and years of slavery, they're not going to sort of latch onto the first person who comes along and says, I'm going to get you out of here. And what this Midrash is saying is, they will not be convinced by miracles. They need words. The words, of course, that Moses says is, God has said, pakod pakadati, I have heard, I have heard your distress, and I will come and rescue you. Okay, so basically, Moses has asked, asked Serach, how is she going to convince them? When Moses and Aaron came to the elders and performed the signs in their sight, the elders of Israel went to Serach and said to her, a certain man has come and has performed signs in her sight, thus and thus. She said to them, there is no reality in signs. They said to her, he said, Pakod Yifkod, God will surely visit you. And she said to them, he is the man who will redeem Israel in the future from Egypt. For thus did I hear, Pakod Pakadati, I have surely visited you. Forthwith the people believed in their God and in his messenger, as it is said, and the people believed, and when they heard that the Lord had visited the children of Israel. Okay, now is that clear? There's this secret, this sort of secret, it's like Torah Shabbat Peh, the oral law that is being passed down, orally, the chain of tradition that was from Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, all through this line. They're along with another secret tradition, which are the signs of redemption, which are these special code words that indicate that God's redemption is at hand. And they were used up with Abraham and with Isaac and with Jacob and with Joseph. And the last, well, the one we didn't look at is then it comes with David in the redemption, the messianic redemption. But this one is the redemption from Egypt. And the only person around who knows what the words are, what the code is to show that Moses is the genuine redeemer, is Serach, because she was part of this oral tradition. So again, she was a pretty amazing woman, according to the Midrash. Not only did she live a long time, but she is an agent of this redemption. Without her, Moses would never have been believed. Any comments, any thoughts?
Seems very far-fetched.
Well, yes, it is. It's mysticism. It is mysticism. So, yeah, Mark.
I find my mind going back to Segula, that this hidden thing, this mystery, that and her name sort of sums that up in a way, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Well, that's exactly why, and that's exactly why I brought it. It is. This is why Segula, that she is not just a woman who happened to live a very long time and remember where Joseph's bones are buried, but she has a role in the unfolding of the sort of redemptive history of Israel. Okay, Christina.
Is it pardes, like the different levels of interpretation?
Yeah.
Like the
hidden. This is the sod. Yes.
Yeah, like the hidden, the mystical. But absolutely. I kind of love how she is like the every woman, like in these little gaps of like, how did they know this? How did they know this? She appears, and there's this do you know the Hara E person poem about her?
I don't think I do.
There's a poem by this American rabbi who's high up in the CCAR that basically says that because there's the midrash that she's the one who tells everything, right? That because of that, she's like rewarded with this eternal life to be this historian who's always around to remember all of these things. And here they go to her, right? Because she's been around for 450, I don't know. I wasn't even doing the math correctly to come back to them leaving Israel in the first place. I guess you would go to her if she'd been around that long.
Yeah. Francis.
I am wondering, what if it's not a name, but rather a title? So that's potentially being passed down. So obviously you wouldn't mention her maybe chronologically between the two brothers that she's closest to in age, but you would mention her separately when they go to Egypt. And then, I mean, that would be a way why a person of the same name can appear and have similar knowledge, if that's sort of the office of the wise woman.
That certainly is the case. And the office of the wise woman was one that was sort of passed down. I mean, very clearly, and wise women did have a role. And as much as we can find out exactly what happened, people are finding out, what happened. Whether the actual name of Serach I don't know. Emma.
I was just wondering if there are any texts that link Sarah with Elijah, just because
Yes.
it does seem to be.
Yes, we'll get it. We'll get there. We'll get there. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, just like the redemption kind of narrative.
Yes.
And
Yes. Yes. We'll get to that to the, well, actually, we're going to have to hurry up because we're not going to get, otherwise we won't get to the end. So what can I miss out? Sorry.
We'll stay. It's fascinating. Don't miss anything.
Right. Well, the Shemot Rabbah is very similar to Segula. It basically, it again, but well, actually, no. No, it isn't. It's because this is taking us back to Joseph now. Aaron spoke all the words. Okay, he did as God commanded. He will speak to the people. He did the signs in the sight of the people. This is Aaron, okay, which he told him. See, the people believed. They did as God had said, and they shall hearken to his voice. This is all quotations, of course, from Exodus here. Okay, the people believed. They shall hearken. Yes. Do not conclude that they believed only after they'd seen the signs. No, they heard that the Lord had visited. They believed because they heard, not because they saw the signs. What made them believe? The sign of God's visitation, which he communicated to them. For they had this as a tradition from Jacob. Jacob having handed down the secret to Joseph, Joseph to his brothers, while Asher, the son of Jacob, had handed down the secret to his daughter Serach, who was still alive. And this is what he told her. Any redeemer that will come and say to my children, will surely visit you, shall be regarded as a true deliverer. And when therefore Moses came and said the words, the people believed him at once, and they believed him as soon as they heard the password. And that's why it's written in Shemot, when they heard that the Lord had visited the children of Israel, that he had seen their affliction, then they bowed their heads and worshipped. They bowed their heads at God's visitation. Okay? I'm going to skip the Hizkuni. Hizkuni is a very late midrash. It's 13th century, and this is going back to that original that statement which said didn't quite fit. Shem bat Asher Serach. Okay, and the name of Asher's daughter was Serach. This was in Exodus. In the Numbers passage. Okay, why? Torah should have simply said that the daughter of Asher was Serach, but Asher, Serach, not the Shem, the name of the daughter. Basically, there's a tradition, I won't read it now, is that actually she wasn't Asher's daughter, she was adopted, which brings in, I think, another very interesting sort of kind of idea. Essentially, Asher had two wives. His second wife was a widow who had a daughter. So she was adopted by him. There's a lot to unpick and unpack there, and we don't have time, I'm afraid. So I'm going to go to the main text, which I think Sefer HaYashar is again a late one, but I think is probably a very good one to show why is it that Serach bat Asher becomes so important. This has to do with the return of the children of Israel to Jacob, Joseph having revealed himself as their brother, asking, is Jacob still alive? Ask them to go back and bring him down to Egypt, to live in Egypt with them. Okay. On the way back, they worry about how to tell him, because as one midrash, not the one this one, says, nobody believes a liar. They'd lied to him once about his death, and he believed them. Why would they believe him now? Others suggest, well, actually, the shock could kill him. How were they going to tell him? And this is where Sefer HaYashar comes in. When Joseph had finished giving his orders, he turned and went back into Egypt, and the sons of Jacob went to the land of Canaan in joy and happiness to their father. And when they came to the boundaries of the land, they said to one another, what shall we do in bringing this matter before our father? For if we impart it to him suddenly and tell him all about it, he will be greatly astounded at our words, and he will refuse to listen to us. And when they went on until they approached their houses, they met Serach coming towards them. And the damsel was exceedingly beautiful and wise, and a skilled player on the harp. They called her, and she came to them, and she kissed them, and they took her and gave her a harp, and said to her, Go, we pray thee, before our father, and sit down before him, and strike this harp, and speak to him according to these words. They instructed her concerning what she had to say, and she hastened to Jacob, and she sat before him, and she sang, and she played beautifully on the harp, and she sang in the sweetness of her voice, Joseph, my uncle, is alive. He reigns over all the land of Egypt. He is not dead. And she often repeated these words, and Jacob heard her words, and it pleased him greatly. And when he heard her sing it 2 or 3 times, the heart of Jacob was possessed by joy through the sweetness of her voice, and the Spirit of God came over him, and he knew that all her words were true. And Jacob blessed Serach for singing these words before him. And he said, My daughter, may death never prevail against you forever, for you have revived my spirit. Only repeat you this song once more before me, for you have caused me gladness with your words. And she sang once more the same words, and Jacob listened, and he was pleased and he rejoiced. And the Spirit of God came over him. And while he was yet speaking with her, his sons came before him with horses and chariots and royal garments and servants running before him. So this is why she lived such a long time, is because she was the one who brought the news that Joseph was still alive to Jacob. And you get this wonderful picture of, how, with a song, sometimes you hear a song and you catch the tune and it's very pleasant. And then you start listening to the words, but they don't quite sink in. And it takes a while, and gradually you get the words, and then gradually you get the meaning of the words. And it was a very gentle way that he got to hear this. And that's why Serach was, according to the tradition, granted this long life, which is how she could pop up, how she could go down to Egypt and still be there to know where Joseph's bones were, and still be there in Avel to tell Yoav not to destroy the city and tell the people, to be sensible and not give up, 1,000 of their fellows to be killed. And it goes on. Now, if you think about what she has done, let me just see what other midrashim we've got. She lives on, because you have in the Pesachta of Rav Kahana, again, quite a late midrash, the fact that she ends up in the study halls of the rabbis in Yavne. Rabbi Yochanan sat and explicated how the water became for the Jews like a wall at the splitting of the sea. And Rabbi Yochanan explicated that it was like lattice work, like a net. But Serach bat Asher looked out and said, it wasn't like that. It was like a glass window. Now, the extraordinary thing here is not only that she's still alive, 1,000 years later, but that she's sitting in a study hall with the men as they're discussing Torah. Not only that, she objects. Okay, Mark.
Looks out of what?
Pardon?
She looks out. What does she look out of?
Right, probably the mechitza.
Oh, okay.
Pops her head round the sort of curtain,
Got it.
But she's there. That's the thing. She's actually there. Okay. So going back to what Emma says, Serach vat Asher is a woman who never dies. Okay. She talks about redemption, and she's considered to be a deliverer. Okay. And she appears and she intervenes in matters of scripture. Sorry, Christina. Yeah.
But so she never dies, but could she also be like Batia? So I know we were kind of skipping over this Chizkuni on Numbers, but Batia is a Gentile who converts, who is said to go straight to the Garden of Eden. If she's also a Gentile who's adopted and presumably converts through that process.
Well, no, she wasn't a Gentile. She was part of the part of Israel.
Adopted.
But she was adopted.
But
yes.
Does that also, is she also someone who then goes straight to the Garden of Eden rather than?
Well, yes and no. I mean, there are different traditions because she has a grave in Isfahan. It's revered, you know, so she died and buried according to one set of traditions. She's up in paradise according to the others. But it does look like, if you use that she's kind of translated to heaven in a similar way to Elijah. You know, because the fact that she appears and intervenes in matter of Torah in that particular Rav Kahana parallels the Teku of Elijah. There's this idea in the Talmud. You're pretty familiar. The rabbis discuss matters of law in Talmud. They take a vote, and the majority decision becomes the law. But every so often, they can't decide. It's equal. They can't come to a decision. And it's basically, they say it's Aramaic, the acronym is Teku, and I can't remember exactly what the Aramaic means, but it is basically, we will leave this aside for Elijah, who will decide for us. There's this tradition that Elijah, who never died, appears and explains matters of halakha, and will give the definitive answer. And the most famous is the 5th cup at Pesach, Elijah's cup. Because Elijah's cup is not the cup that, you know, Elijah drinks from. The idea is that there is this debate because there's this interpretation of a biblical verse. Does it have 4 promises of redemption or 5 promises of redemption? They're definitely 4, so we drink 4 cups of wine, 1 for each promise of redemption. But there may be a 5th promise of redemption, but we don't know. So as a compromise, we pour out the wine, but we don't drink it because we wait for Elijah to come. And that's why we open the door for Elijah to come in and tell us whether we should drink that 5th cup or not. Okay, so that's Elijah's role, or one of Elijah's roles. And that is exactly the role that Serach is using in this particular Pesachta de Rav Kahana passage, okay? So she intervenes in scriptural interpretations. She talks about redemption, and she's considered to be the deliverer. She's the agent of deliverance from Egypt, and you know, and the agent of deliverance. You know, she delivered Jacob, or enabled Jacob to go to Egypt, and then she enables Moses to bring the bones of Joseph back from Egypt. It's very much as if she is a female Elijah figure. And in fact, amongst the Anusim of Spain and Portugal, that's exactly the role that Serach bat Asher had. There was a great explosion of messianic activity, as there always is at times of enormous trouble and suffering. And Elijah was spotted everywhere, and everyone was expecting the Messiah to come. But there are times when Serach bat Asher pops up, and there's one description of Elijah and Serach bat Asher arriving together hand in hand to deliver the message of redemption. So she, you know, she definitely is seen as a parallel to this sort of Elijah figure. So, you know, we're thinking that if the prophets that can herald the coming of the Messiah can be a woman, then what about the Messiah herself? So I kind of leave you with that question. So we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank
That was
you.
fascinating.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Bye.